Hello and welcome to another episode of Who Knew in the Moment, the podcast. I'm your host, Phil Friedrich, and today I'm honored to have David Tyree with me. David is a former NFL football player with the catch, and something I'm really excited to highlight in his story today is just the process that he's gone on from being focused on football to becoming focused on being the best man that he can be, and excited to highlight that. So, David, thanks so much for being on today, my man.
Phil, you're a gem, brother. Thanks for having me on, man. Appreciate it.
You betcha. So let's talk about sixth grade version of David. This was an opportunity where you were kind of moving and you got the chance to start playing some football with some kids in the neighborhood. So talk a little bit about that for you.
Yeah, it was definitely life changing. Montclair, New Jersey, moved in toward the end of fifth grade, so just finding my way. New community. But what was very clear about the town was that it was a sports town, healthy community, vibrant. And it was a social thing. I tell people we're manufacturing talent these days. I think for me it was a social thing, and I was average at it, but I had some decent. I was an active kid, so it worked out. It worked out really well for me. But I'm telling you, there was just so much kids who were in it, talented, and I just kind of rode the wave.
Yeah. So talk a little bit about that. I think sometimes people view sports as it's just like a physical activity, but I think it can be, a center for a lot of crucial relationships in our lives. I think it can be an opportunity to really learn a lot of life lessons in a pretty non-threatening environment. But talk a little bit about that for you and your younger years.
Yeah, I certainly believe that the most important part of it is the social dynamic that's really at play, right? Learning how to collaborate, learning how to accept, learning how to tolerate, general people skills that young people now get engaged with, typically in most circumstances in an environment that they want to be in. Yeah. And I think that's the biggest difference between, you're trying to teach these things at home, trying to instill hard work, trying to instill discipline, but they might not want to do the dishes, right? So whereas the kids on the basketball court, they want to shoot the ball. So if they have to be quiet to give themselves opportunity to shoot the ball, that's really where it starts. And I think that's the magic of sport, is creating an environment where people actually want to be involved, and it gives them the opportunity to learn those disciplines. And that's really how it was. And I think you start recognizing that maybe you could be good, or, just the natural comparative skills, not the toxic comparative skills. That I'm a little better than this guy. So it helps to really build the EQ from a young age. So it did that for me in Montclair, New Jersey. Like I said, I moved from a more urban area in East Orange, New Jersey, that was a little rougher, had all the same offerings, but would have never picked it up in the same way.
Absolutely. So as you continue to progress, high school comes around, and as a freshman, you have a pretty impactful conversation with a coach, or maybe a relationship with a coach. So talk a little bit about that and what that meant in your life at that time.
Yeah, it's pretty neat. Like, I think eighth grade was like a year I had an injury. I came back from the injury and I wasn't the same player. And my best friend at the time, he's the best player on the team. And, we had a great relationship. And all summer, he would basically be digging into me about how soft my hits were. Like we jabbed and we went after it. But our coach Fisher he was really excited. He was our freshman team coach. He was the coach of our freshman team. And he was just pouring confidence, man. Excited to coach it. And just having someone believe in you is one of the most powerful experiences at any level, at any moment, at any age that I think someone can experience in general. So just that excitement and zeal that he had for the game, really, egging us on toward the weight room, approaching high school. It really took the experience to the next level, as well as, wanting to prove my best friend that I had some juice moving into the year. So it was definitely a pivotal moment where I think I had a different kind of eagerness to prove that, that I could compete and excel on a different level.
Now, you talked a little bit about, someone having confidence in you, maybe even before you had that level of confidence in you. Spoiler alert, David is the father of 7 kiddos. So how do you kind of take that and give that impression to your kids now, being in, a father figure role to them?
That's a great question. I think what I've always tried my best to do is frame their life with the right words, right?
Yeah.
I tend to be a little bit of I'm a straight shooter, so I do tend to be a judger. I always like to live in reality, and I think with the skill that I've had to learn is to ask questions, but also to continue to frame their life with the right words, and celebrate the right things. Not just celebrate, not celebrate what I would say is the outcome, but celebrate the work ethic. Right? These are things that we kind of read or hear about, but to practice it is something that is, it is a skill, right? Because when you're an adult and you recognize how to perform, at a high level, and you want to correct and critique and do those things. So that's been a progressive experience. And like I said, I got a lot of experience with 7 kids. And I think that's the way that's really important is also, I understood this about myself was that environments were crucial to cultivating certain habits. And, that was something that I have 4 sons, and they kind of packaged together, 2 are 20 and 17, and the other guys are 11 and 10. So much better with the 11 and 10-year-old and helping to produce environments where they can gain some confidence aside from my instruction. So some of it is just what kind of environment I'm creating. And a lot of it is also just the formative words that will help them.
Absolutely. So as your high school career progresses on, you get a couple letters from Syracuse, from Ohio State, and a comment from your sister about what's possible really opened your eyes to, all right, well, let's maybe pursue this college football thing. So talk a little bit about that and, where you ended up deciding to go play.
Yeah, it was pretty neat. And I would even say long before letters came in, my sister, I think she was on like a drill team in her high school or something like that. And one of her closest friends played on the high school basketball team. So he just looked like somebody,
Yeah.
and it was really neat. And as a young kid, 7, 8 years old, like, oh man, his name was D-Bob. And so, I grew up wanting to be a Scotty dog living in East Orange. Fast forward to Montclair. Now, as I'm taking up athletics and I'm pursuing, as I'm going into high school, this is something that really wasn't on my radar. And to get the first piece of mail as a sophomore from Ohio State, and it was just a questionnaire, right?
Yeah.
Syracuse, Ohio State, it was the possibility, like, this is possible. I'm actually on the radar in some kind of weird way. I didn't know anything. I didn't ask much questions, but, just to remember that, hey, so, she said, you can get you one of them football scholarships, or athletic scholarships. You can go to school for free. It was such a powerful seed because it was beyond my scope of imagination or something I could comprehend. And now here it is down the road, it's walking me down. It was really a special experience.
Yeah. So as you transition and you end up deciding Syracuse is the spot for you.
Yeah.
As you get there, I'd love to say, hey, year one, you're just putting up huge numbers as a wide receiver. Like, if it weren't for the draft rule that you got to go to college for a long period of time, you would have left. But you came in and you started the role that you had the opportunity to play in. So talk a little bit about just, that transition into college and maybe going from, feeling like the man in high school to, all right, I'm getting a new role now that I'm in college.
Yeah, man. That's the biggest transition in my personal opinion from high school to college. As much as I was the man, I never was the super stud. We had such a rich tradition of talent where almost every year somebody went Division I, even at a public school. And the guy who I was a teammates with, he went to Virginia. We took all of our visits together. He went to Virginia. I went to Syracuse. And he was one of the state players of the year. And so I was always second fiddle, even though I was obviously talented and had my opportunities. So by the time I get to Syracuse, you're arriving at a big stage. And of course, you're confident and you want to contribute. And that quickly became to a screeching end when you're dealing with a couple All-Americans. Kevin Johnson, Quentin Spotwood at the time were they were All-Americans. They were really the best of what they did in the receiver room. And Donovan McNabb's throwing darts all over the place. It was just a whole new world. I'm like, and the standards were great. So it was really just keeping up keeping up, still having the belief, but also having to recognize or assess myself at the same time. So this is where I guess the self-awareness piece really became a huge reality for me. And, getting redshirted is like a blow. It's like I'm been playing football, all these years, and I get to the place where I can't even play in a game. So, these are sobering realities that, you have to, you do go through these places of, maybe a little bit of self-pity. Maybe it's a little bit of politicking, but ultimately in the depths of my heart is I knew that there were guys in that room that were better than me. And, I had to figure out how I was going to create my opportunities moving forward.
So as you say that, I think there's this fine line of I saw or I noticed that there were guys that were better than me at that time. So how does one, opposed to buying into that and start just saying, I'm not good enough, versus, hey, they're better than me now, but if I work hard, I bet I can get to where they're at or beyond. So talk a little bit about kind of that fine line and where your mental state had to be to get to where you wanted to go.
Yeah, I think it is a fine line. And I do believe some of this does have to do with everything that shaped us and everything that we grew up learning and believing up to that point. So at any moment of crisis, adversity, et cetera, it's all about who you are and what has shaped you up to that moment. So adversity was no stranger, but I did have a deep competitive desire and a belief that I belonged. Yeah. Right. And I think that's the basis of flourishing in any environment, in any work environment, and any, sports environment, whatever you would consider. It's the desire to excel, right? The belief that you can. And so of course, everything starts with the mental fortitude. And I think that's what I had. My crushing blow of I'm not the best didn't make me believe that I wasn't the best. And I think, it's a weird construct. I'm not the best, but I'm the best, right? So inwardly, I had this reality of I'm going to be the best, but right now these guys are better than me, and I'm going to watch them, imitate them, learn. But at the same time, I still believe I'm the best.
I love it. That's good. So as your career progresses on, you have a very important gal that you meet and an important life event that happens. So talk a little bit about that and adding that into the college football and college scenario.
Yeah, college was tough. I kind of, in a sad way, I call it the dark years because I just grew up. Who I was who I was. I was I was a boom bust, and in many ways, my personality is that way. So, I think it was the dark years only because I was young and foolish, and my life was riddled with poor decisions, and my vices were just kind of present because, just like most young kids, not that it's not normal, but when we talk about growing and progressing and living a life of meaning, integrity, and things that I value, and I think are very impressive when I see young people do it, it's not impossible, right? So, I definitely had my struggle with the alcohol, but meeting Leala in my freshman year, she was a cut above the rest. And that's all I could say about her was there was something peculiar, even from a distance before I got to know her, that actually she shot me down the first time. I'm not gonna go too deep into that, but it made me go back another time, and thank God for a little liquid courage that second time.
Yes, sir.
So not that alcohol didn't do any good for me.
I love it.
Short story, that happened freshman year, getting to know her. But what I do believe about a stable relationship is does have the ability to ground you. And and not to make it about that, but I had to navigate my experience at Syracuse, which was in some ways, really challenging, of wanting to be the guy, earning my stripes early on, but not having the career that I wanted to have, to elevating and earning those opportunities, whether it was through special teams or as a wide receiver. And by the time I'm, I guess a junior, we end up expecting our first child in college. So you're talking about the blow of blows.
Yeah.
It doesn't become more traumatic than that when you're looking at not just your own life, but also potentially jacking somebody else's life up. So, it was something that was, devastating in an instance. But I think because of our prior experience that we both had relationally, I was never going to pressure a decision on her. And, I actually had an abortion at 14, 15 years old. And you're talking about the what ifs of that decision. I don't think anyone's ever comfortable, although we have the liberty to make those kind of decisions. And I wasn't comfortable with it, although it was a decision that I made. So, it was the best decision that, I empowered her to make the best decision. And I'm really grateful that we just were responsible and we were able to, be mother and father as little peons, not knowing anything about life at that point. At that time, I was 21 years old.
Yeah. So we're heading into, the football season. We got dad duty, we got school, we got football, right? We're juggling a lot, but talk about, that final season before we, end up going to the pros. And just there's a couple games in there that really stand out as like highlight games for you of, hey, I put in the work and I finally got the on-field, numbers that I felt like I was deserving of.
Yeah. That it was that year. I will say having Tayon gave me a new sense of selflessness, a new sense of motivation. I remember, it's funny how everything has its own niche now, but I do remember going to the line of scrimmage through my senior year training camp, and I would have a visual of my son almost every play. Wow. And so we talk about being empowered and having a different kind of why, right? Yeah. So that's, common take in relation to how people are finding their motivation. He was my why. I had something or someone that was now bigger than me to motivate me. Whereas I actually didn't have NFL aspirations like as a kid growing up. I was living out my aspiration. My dream was to go play Division I-A football, and I was actually living it. And because I wasn't thriving at it, I never really felt like I attained it until Tayon was like, wow, how can I provide something for him that, I don't know how to do it, man. It would be amazing if I just got an opportunity, because I wasn't on like scouts radars. I had this trickling effect as a wide receiver, and I'm paving my way. Who goes to Division I schools and wants to play special teams? No one, right?
Yeah.
So I think my mindset was, how can I contribute? How can I make an impact? So I did have these ways of thinking that there was some selfless and selfish desires. I wanted to get in the stat sheet. That's how I ran down on kickoff. And it ended up serving me well, understanding I was going to do everything and create or make every opportunity so that I can do the best or create the best opportunity for Tayon moving forward.
Now, and I don't know if maybe in these moments you had as much, we'll just say, wisdom as you do today, but when you think back to that, I think so many people have an ego, right? I'm this position or I'm that, and they kind of silo themselves and define themselves at this. And then all of a sudden the opportunity comes, but it's not the opportunity they were expecting. And they say no, because it's not what I wanted, right? So talk a little bit about that. Someone that's listening that maybe they had an opportunity presented to them and they turned it down. And the reason they turned it down was because it wasn't what they thought it was going to be.
Yeah, this is just a common in the human experience, right? So I work with high performing athletes in my role in the front office. And this is something that most people who value themselves, their ability, their skills at a high rate, which they should. And the problem is other people are determining their value. Right. And that's the bottom line. Meaning, like in business and sport, it's someone else. It's not until someone else says you are that you are. Right. Yeah. And I think the confidence, which kind of goes in line with our ego, can really, skew our assessment of that. And it's really difficult. I think that, the nature of being humble and hungry presents greater opportunities, and humility is not like this. I don't think it's this virtue that everybody's deeply equipped with.
Yeah, right.
I think life humbles us And that's how we begin to learn and begin to assess this. So the sooner that we can have some of these experiences, or we put ourselves in position to learn, that means to be teachable, right? These are the ways that we could actually grow at a greater rate. And that's what my experience was. Life was humbling me along the way. And I was putting myself out there. I was failing fast at a lot of different things. And so by the time like I said, not making an impact was never a thing for me. And so that's what allowed me to move toward my senior year, looking at every opportunity to scrape it. In my senior season, I definitely had a few highlight games that really opened up the door to kind of expand my little NFL resume as I was looking for that opportunity.
Yes, sir. So the Giants come calling.
Oh man, that was like, I want to say so unexpected. The process really is what it is, meaning you don't know where you're going to go. You go through all your training. They tell you this, they tell you that. And I just really wanted to get into a camp. So to be sitting there, I knew, they says highest fourth round to not at all. And that's a real assessment. And so when just sitting there, it was 2 days at the time, and to actually have my phone ring and the Giants are there, it was like, wow, I'm 20 minutes from the facility, right back home in Montclair. And it was fun to actually, right while I'm on the call and they're waiting to pick me up, the Detroit Lions called and they had the first pick of the 7th round. So I was like, I got the Giants. So I got hot real quick. But no, it was a great experience. And although I grew up hating the Giants because I was a 49er fan in the 80s, it was a dream come true, and it couldn't have worked out. I would say it could have worked out better for me, and worse at the same time, being a hometown kid, still growing up. But when we look at hindsight, that was a dream come true, and I was right down the road.
So talk a little bit about like you said, kind of the hometown kid. I had the opportunity to have Marcus Trufant on, and Marcus is from Washington, went to Washington State, and then played his entire career with the Seahawks. And he's like, man, that's a lot of pressure, you're always in the limelight because everyone knows you. So talk a little bit about that, being, from the area and then staying in the area. Yeah,
I think for me, it was definitely, it wasn't as much pressure because I didn't have any expectation. When you get drafted low, everyone's, of course, number one, they're aware and they're celebratory, my hometown celebratory. The people who know me, they're proud of me. But no one knew what to expect from me as a player in the National Football League. I think the pressure for me was, what I didn't have the wisdom or understanding on how to navigate was how to be a pro, how to separate myself from the toxic environments and habits that I had as a young man, the traditional vices of women, marijuana, and alcohol. Yeah. And the fact that I already had my own friends actually didn't serve me well because maybe some of my teammates would have extracted me out of environments that my immature way of thinking and foolish way of thinking at the time I was ingratiated with. So, I'm back at the crib. Now I got a little money. Let's go do it. So those were the traps for me that I had no ability to really navigate. And like I said, it came to a crashing win after a very successful rookie year. So on the field, it was, I exceeded expectations, but off the field, I was definitely a failure.
So let's dive into that a little bit. A mentor of mine, he played for the Miami Dolphins, and he used this analogy. He goes, it's a lot easier to have 6 people standing on a table and raising one person up than it is to be the one person standing on the table and have 6 people pulling you down, right? And I think about that, who we surround ourselves with is so important, because it's tough to stay on the path that I know I should if the people around me aren't doing what I think I should. So talk a little bit about that for you and just in your life, how that's continued to play out.
Yeah, I think I think the biggest difficulty that every young man will find or experience is who to trust. And when you're entering the ecosystem of professional sports, and there's been so much progress because there's so much more information. I think in 2003, it was limited. You had to have exceptional relationships or an
Yeah.
exceptional experience to be able to navigate that with the kind of tact that is actually absolutely necessary to actually maximize the unique experience. So, if you don't have someone who is ingratiated in with that opportunity, and or welcome the idea of being mentored, then it's just like, hey, you feel like you should know, and that's kind of, I've been grossly independent. I probably had way too much independence as a young man growing up, and that was just me figuring out life. And I think that it's great to see. I've worked with so many athletes who have a bit of a brain trust. They understand the idea of creating a board. Obviously, brand is a common conversation now, and people are well equipped to actually give themselves to voices with experience. They understand what an accountant is and the need for it. They're having these conversations in college. So there were just few people that had access to so much of those resources. It was just get in there and figure it out. And, and if you had a good, I would say if you're a structure, meaning like if you had a good firm foundation in relation to who you were probably just better equipped to handle that time, handle those scenarios at that time. And that just was not who I was at the time. And that's what I say, when you're elevated to positions where your character can't sustain, it will crumble, and you'll get the lessons that you need.
Absolutely. So as you're entering into the NFL now, once again, you make the 53-man roster, and that first year you get recognized as the special teams rookie of the year. So talk a little bit about just the focus that you had on, once again, starring in the role that you're given and taking the opportunities that are presented.
Well, Phil, I was an absolute monster.
Yeah.
I'm coming out the woodwork because, there were very few people who got drafted as a special teams player. And I was one of those few. Meaning my resume as a special teams player alone is what got me drafted as a New York Football Giant. And I really wasn't that insulted because I wasn't expected to be drafted. And I knew I had some promise as a receiver. So I understood what they were trying to say. And I expected to deliver. And it felt good to actually do it. It felt good to be, because I just actually enjoyed the sport. I was a little bit of a renaissance man. I was more of a football player than I was a wide receiver. Yeah. And, you can't be positionless. So I might as well be the best wide receiver. And so, I played defensive end in high school, linebacker in high school. So I enjoyed hitting people. So it was just normal. And so it felt good to actually get in there and deliver and be the best at something and be recognized as being one of the best. And then also to excel as a wide receiver when my opportunities were given. So I think for me, that rookie year was definitely shining on the field. It was just overcoming the obstacles of who I was as a young man. And, thank God that I was able to deliver on the field, because who knows, if I didn't, there might not be any future in my NFL career.
Yeah. No, that's so good. So as you're progressing, though, and you've talked a little bit about kind of the off the field things, at some point, a conversation about faith and God enters into David's life. So talk a little bit about how that kind of came to be and where you had been prior to that from a faith standpoint.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't really have any faith, and there was no upbringing in that area. So I think I certainly had a decent, value structure. More, like I wasn't, just like we all say, we're not the worst human beings in the world. And I think what happened, I just had a collision course with God. And, like my life and my faith is very simple in that way. When, through Christ, I recognized that I needed help. And I was like, I'm in jail. I'm like, help God.
Yeah.
And I had that plea that got answered. And so that's how I came to saving faith in Christ. And my life was radically different within weeks. 3 months later from the moment I got arrested on marijuana possession, I'm married and I'm a new person. So, for me, it wasn't this religious thing because I didn't have religion growing up. Yeah. It was a real experience. And that gave me the stability to rebuild credibility as a person. It gave me the standard that was higher than my own. that whether it was in my marriage, raising my children. And that's what I tell people. You have to have a standard that's higher than your own.
Yeah.
And that's what most people are lacking in their human experience, is that whatever we believe, we deem that to be the highest set of standards. And I think that's aimless, So that was the blessing that Christ brought in my life. And from there, it was to the moon, because now I had stability. All the places that I ached and the person that I knew I wasn't, the hypocrite that when I went and talked to kids to inspire them, I didn't have to be a hypocrite anymore, Yeah. And it wasn't about being morally, perfect. It was about being consistent and authentic. And that was an awesome experience for me. And it definitely changed the trajectory of who I was as a player and as a person, as a father, as a husband, as a leader. And it served me well even to this day.
So there's a couple of things that, some people listening right now don't have a faith life. Some people listening right now do have a faith life. So somebody listening right now says, well, gosh, you were, doing this, you're doing that. And then the 3 months later, your life's radically changed. How is that even possible? Talk a little bit about just, maybe submitting to, what that higher calling is, and being willing to say, all right, I'm going to step out and stop doing some of the things I know probably aren't the best for my life.
Yeah. I think for the way it happened in my life was I came to the end of myself, so I'm like 24 years old, NFL special teams rookie of the year, Giants rookie of the year. And here I am in jail. I mean, like, so if I'm so wise, if I'm so, whatever, right. And at that, if you look at my life on the outside, I'm crushing, but for me, I just had an honest assessment. And I think we have these internal markers when we're, in our experience where we're honest with ourselves, but maybe we don't get to that place of surrender, yielding. And even though I prayed to God, I didn't even know it was Jesus, I just said, God, and there was a domino effect where Christ became real. My aunt just invited me to church. I figured, why not? Right? I could use an inspirational message right now. And in that moment, it all just collapsed. All the weight of my life, my poor decisions came crashing down, and I knew I needed a savior. I knew I needed hope. And it came through Christ. And I know that that's the reality, but I know there's all kinds of listeners. And all I can say is Jesus is a real person.
Yeah.
So that's my thing. And I'm unashamed about it. But I think we do have to come to a place of surrender, be honest about who we are and where we want to be. Yeah. And I think that's how we progress even as humans. For me, understanding that I was a sinner and needed a savior was how I connected to Christ in a real way, and that I can be forgiven and live and have a more meaningful experience, that my conscience isn't condemned to who I am. So, there's a lot of different dynamics. I know everybody's trying to get by in life. And I think my story resonates with being an overcomer and being forgiven.
Absolutely. Now, the other thing that I would ask about is maybe talking to the person that says, man, I've lived in that sin, or I've lived in, these tough life events, but I decided to change, but I'm having a tough time forgiving myself or getting over some of the past, mistakes that I've made. Talk a little bit about that and just being able to move past that and say, hey, it happened, right? Like, I'm not saying it didn't happen, but I'm moving past that.
Yeah, I think that's a great question too, because that's another human thing as well. I mean, like, everybody's walking out their faith, their life, and there's things that are condemning us, haunting us, tormenting us. Yeah. And all I know is the liberty that has been afforded to me through Christ. So I would be honest to say that that's my experience. But what I also know is that, there's nothing that any human can do about the actions, the decisions that they've made yesterday. And I think that that mind that serves us well is to have a repentant mind, meaning moving forward. So, forgetting those things that are behind me and pressing forward. And I think that, so long as we steward the relationships that we have, right? Be a good steward of relationships. If you did somebody wrong, make it right. And I think those are the things that permit us the opportunity to move forward. If there's a relationship, I think it's more things like that actually hold us back. And they're like weights in our past that we can't move forward with. there's sometimes the weight is there because it hasn't been addressed. So maybe we need to address some things in our past, and maybe we need to address a relationship, a parent, a colleague, et cetera. And then it's easier to move forward where we can reconcile certain events from our past to move forward, and the weight is no longer there. So I think just as much as it's real in our faith, it's real in experience as well.
I love it. Absolutely. So as your career is progressing, you just continue to get better and better. And it's not only, special teams. Now we're starting to excel in the wide receiver position, the one that maybe we were hoping to be in, even though we were crushing in the special teams. And as we get to a point, the career is going well, numbers are starting picking up. And then we have this really tough year where we have injuries, we have a mom pass away, and just talk through that year and kind of all the hardships that are going on, but still staying dialed in, showing up, giving everything you got.
Yeah. This is actually the Super Bowl season, my fifth year in the league. Yeah. Had my share of all pro accolades, and I've had ups and downs as a receiver. I've been as high as third on the depth chart, which is a great position. And I've also been, just kicked down the depth chart, and they just want me to play special teams. Yeah. And this year, I actually fractured my scaphoid wrist, my scaphoid, which is a bone in the wrist. And it's actually a little bit of a sticky surgery, as I learned. And so I missed the last couple of preseason games. I missed the first 2 regular season games. And, the neat thing about the story was I actually got, I hired a new accountant, and he's a spiritual, he's a Christian, and he calls me up. He says, "David, I got something that's like burning in my heart to share with you." And I'm like, "Okay, cool, shoot." Yeah. And he says to me, "The platform that you have right now as a wide receiver isn't big enough. God's going to make your name great as a wide receiver." Wow. And I'm like, "Okay, that's pretty cool." I'm a believer, so I'm believing. Yeah. And what he said was, he said these words, but I'm actually right in the midst of my surgery. Like, I'm hurt. And of course I believe God, and I, in my mind, I'm thinking, how is this going to happen? And, some way somebody maybe gets hurt, injuries happen, long NFL season, and I'm believing God. And it wasn't a hard thing to believe it, but I just knew what I was coming against. And this ended up being one of the, less productive seasons I've ever had, special teams wise. I think I only had like 10 or 12 tackles. I'm 15 to 20 every year. And then, in December, as I, make my way back, and, we're easing into this playoff stretch, I end up losing my mom, and a sudden heart attack. And it was devastating. It's I'm called that night before the Washington game in the middle of this playoff stretch. My wife is at the hotel, and, can't be great news, but that was far from the news that I was even expecting to receive. And so I actually have to miss the Redskins game and the following game, now grieving and tending to my mom. And, in many ways, just because of the position I held in my family, just kind of making things right as far as, the arrangements. My sisters were amazing, and we had to navigate that. So I watched the Buffalo game where we really caught some steam. We buried my mom on that Saturday. I watched the Buffalo game. And next thing you know, I come back on next week with the Patriots, and that's the final game of the season. And I'm kind of like in the game plan, because we go from 3 wide receivers to 4 more 4 wide receiver sets and passing down. So even that adversity and all that we experienced, it comes back, and I was a part of the game plan on this Super Bowl stretch, which proved to be a miraculous stretch.
Yeah. So walk us through the mental state, though, right? I mean, how tough, right? Like you said, hey, I bury my mom one day, a week later, I'm showing up and I'm playing. I mean, I don't know how everyone's different, how they handle emotions, but that's not a long period of time to really work through something. So talk about being able to show up even during, adversity and tough emotional times.
Yeah, that's a great question. I would say, I think that football definitely provided a shelter for me in that moment. And I certainly wasn't necessarily like trying to force a moving on. I've seen all kinds of ways. Some people have, lost a significant other and showed up for work that weekend because they wanted to honor that person. So, I certainly wasn't in that wheelhouse. Didn't want to miss 2 games, just didn't know how to facilitate it any other way. And I think it definitely provided a shelter for me, the community of the locker room, my teammates, the support. It was funny that, Coach Coughlin ended up being one of the most comforting voices as I was sitting in that hotel when my wife delivered the news and I started crying and kind of just sobering up to the reality that I wasn't going to see my mom alive again. And I just talked to her earlier that day. And it's like, I'm hearing this soft, gentle voice. And, I'm like, who is this? As I'm crying, and it's Coach Tom Coughlin, who's known to be as hardcore and rigid as ever. Yeah. So to be in the midst of a playoff run, come back, it definitely gave me shelter out the game, my teammates, and having a sense of meaning to get back into. And what I also did recognize, and I kind of did understand, that my grieving wasn't over. Yeah. And I've grieved through the years because it's a unique relationship that is obviously, just like most people, regardless of the nature of the relationship, you only get one mother. Yeah. So, I was blessed to kind of come back into the environment that gave me so much meaning, satisfaction, and joy. And we were in the midst of this amazing run. But I also was cognizant of the fact that, as I move and I find a role in this, that, moving forward, the person who is my biggest fan, I couldn't share it with. So, when I reached the mountaintop, I think I definitely had every emotional experience that I could muster up. And it was definitely tough, but it was obviously a great place of celebration and honoring my mom.
Yeah. So once again, every season is tough, but getting through the gauntlet of the season, then the playoffs, and then getting to the Super Bowl, I mean, like, it is just a rigor, man. So talk about getting to that point and then walk us through the catch, if you will, in that Super Bowl game.
Yeah, it's definitely a grind, man. And it's like I said, you kind of recognize at some point that something special is happening with your team. Yeah. For me, the real wake-up call was, I'm sitting at home watching the Buffalo game, and, it was a horrible first half. And like I said, we haven't clinched the playoffs yet. And that, for me, that was the special moment. The rain starts pouring in and we start running the ball, smash mouth Giants football. And I just sensed that there was a little bit of a shift. And of course, we lose that final regular season game to the undefeated Patriots, but we gave them everything that they could handle. And so we knew that we had the moxie moving into the playoffs to make a run. And it was special. Every game on the road, from Tampa to Dallas to the frozen tundra of Green Bay, all underdog. And like, for me, I'm in this place as I definitely kind of settled in as a spiritual leader in my team. And I'm just believing God. And I had written a letter to my teammates earlier in the season that basically, I kind of sensed earlier in the year that there was so much that was coming against us in training camp, from injuries to media. Strahan was holding out, as a veteran. He wasn't sure if he was going to return. Yeah. It was a tough narrative. And I sensed that something great was possibly on the horizon. And I wrote a letter to him that, hey, man, let's believe God. This is our year to win a championship. So I'm mindful of all those things that are happening as we're going in the midst of this run. And, here we are, Super Bowl against New England Patriots in the desert. And we felt like we was going to bring the rain. And, so for me, I just know that I got a role. And I just felt like God was going to do something great in my life. I couldn't strum up. I couldn't strum up what happened in that game, but it was definitely a gift from God to be in position, to know that, I could play my role and be a part of something great. And yeah, it definitely all happened.
So the specific play, you kind of mentioned, hey, when it was happening, I didn't even realize what it really looks like until after the game. I get back to the hotel and maybe see a replay of it. But just talk about, I'll say it this way: catching, being in the right position at the right time. I mean, there is something to just be said about it's muscle memory. There's also something to be said about that's a heck of a catch, man. So just talk a little bit about that.
Yeah. So the cool part is that the cool part is that there was, I would say, this was, oh my goodness. So the 76, I never get to play. 76 Maxell Y Union was the play call. And the cool part was at this point, I've already scored a touchdown in the Super Bowl. Now, I just got to give you this backdrop because the night before the game, my teammate's mom actually is, you know, she co-wrote my book. Her name is Kimberly Daniels. She's out there. We're hanging out. I knew her. And she says, David, you know, the night before the game, we're praying because we just want to be blessed, right? She says, David, God's putting spiritual glue on your hands. And she says, God is giving you hinds feet like the feet of a deer to jump high. And the last thing she said is, God's going to give you the big play. Wow. So she speaks all this stuff the night before the game. Yeah. So when I score a touchdown, I'm like, I'm the man. This was it. This is it. God, let's go home and get this W and go home. This is great. And who would have known that was the setup for something way bigger. So when the helmet catch happens, it's a great play call for the defense that they ran on third down. They ran 42 defense, which is cover 4 on one side, cover 2 on the other. It would have been a nice, if the offensive line would have blocked a little bit, for God's sake, they might actually threw me the post and no one would say that I'm the recipient of luck, which I don't welcome at all. You know, it's more providence than luck, you know? Yeah. So yeah, it was just from start to finish, everything about that year, that moment had writing of destiny on the wall. And I think that we were the team of choice. And I was fortunate to be the good recipient of some grit and some grace to have that role in the helmet catch come to fruition.
Absolutely. So for you, after playing career is done, you get the opportunity to mentor in the NFL and help players maybe get to where you were at quicker, right? So talk a little bit just on your passion behind that and, helping people grow and mature in ways that maybe you wish you would have right off the bat.
Oh, absolutely, man. I think that's the role and responsibility as we live, as we grow, as we learn. And I was fortunate to transition my foundation and my faith and my marriage, my family, those things that would secure my transition out of the league. And it took me about 1.5 years before I found myself in the player engagement space, as we call it today, which is basically player development. And it's a tribute, just to be able to have some growth, some know-how, some expertise within the NFL community, but also grow as a professional. And so coming back into the role with the New York Giants as the director of player engagement was really a tremendous gift. But I've always had some penchant and understanding of the growth process, what it takes, being a learner, having some humility and committing myself to being a lifetime learner, but also understanding the nature of how to lead people. Leading, like when you get experience as a young man at 21 years old, becoming a father, you get some early experience of what and what not to do. So I definitely have learned a lot through experience that positioned me for the role and also the opportunity to lead people and serve my community as within the NFL community. So that's basically, I'm a lover of people, man. I just love serving people. I still do that to this day as a speaker, executive coach, and in any capacity I could be of service to as people are growing, needing inspiration, needing wisdom and insight. That's what my life has really afforded me. And the catch was, of course, a big part of that.
Yes, sir. Now, I got to ask, having your girlfriend at the time, you guys been together for quite some time. Talk about just having a supporter at home, we'll say behind the scenes, right? And, how that's helped you, throughout your career, but also where you're at today.
Yeah. 2 is better than 1, right?
Yeah.
That's just known. And I think, of course, it's explicit within a marriage. And I'm just a big pro-marriage guy. I know that statistics around divorce. I think everything starts with a commitment, right? So whether, the basis of a great relationship is always going to start with commitment and sacrifice, right? And I think whether you're pursuing football, whether you're pursuing a job, everything is about your relationship with the next entity or experience. And it's always going to require commitment and sacrifice. And I was fortunate to gather that and understand that in my marriage, and it's probably one of the biggest successes I have in my life, apart from my faith. And I think that is what statistically married people are happier. They have better sex lives. I talk about statistically. We know that folks are getting divorced, but the married people got some things going on. Why? They're stable. They have an anchor in their life that's, again, outside of their own self and their own, because we also have to fight against thoughts. To have somebody, a companion next to you that's your continual cheerleader, despite all of our disagreements, it's so empowering. So that's one dynamic that has been an anchor in my life. Liala is, once people meet her, they're no longer impressed with me. So, and I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. And it's definitely continually, still to this day, we have a lot that we'll be continue to, share and rolling out through our life and experience leading people.
Absolutely. Well, my man, I appreciate you sharing your story and just the pivotal moments that have led to where you're at. I mean, I just love the common theme throughout is you never gave up, but you also focused on what you could be doing to help others. And in turn, that eventually ended up helping you. So I just want to say thanks so much. Any final things you'd like to share with the squad?
Oh man, listen, tune in. I would just say, come find me, davidtyree85.com. Catch the Moment podcast on all platforms. There's just so much more. Thank you for having me on your platform. But ultimately, what I really want to, just encourage people is to, hey man, have the grit, have the grace, and get great done. And, so that's what I think my life really amounts to, is some grit, some grace, and have the capacity and the willingness to get great done. So find me on all those platforms. I'm looking to serve, speak, share, and continue to empower people to be their best as they're moving forward and journeying through life. So I appreciate you, boss.
You bet.